If you're thinking about buying a business, stop what you're doing and listen to this episode. We're going to be showing you strategies so you can overcome any type of nightmare that you could be getting yourself into with a business on this episode on All Things LOCS. Dan, so we are well aware that there's going to be a massive, massive transfer of wealth by 2030, 2045, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Talk us through this kind of emotional roller coaster that a lot of these teachers out there about buying businesses, which is really good, but there's a secret behind all this.
Wait, did you say trillions?
Trillions.
Holy shit, it's a lot of money. Yeah, so let's call it what it is, right? So there's a baby boomers, the biggest generation population-wise in the United States. They have the most wealth, but they also own the most businesses. So the tricky thing, yeah, by far, it's not even close. I forget the number off the top of my head, but it's a majority of them. And what happens when these individuals, they go to retire, a lot of them don't know what the hell to do with their business, right? Mm-hmm. It's either you lean on your family, like my parents and then my brother, they had a family business together and they found somebody that they can sell to, but that's not the norm. A lot of places just, they close. So this is going to provide a lot of people the opportunity to get into business, which is a great way to build wealth and a great way to build a financial legacy. However, you know, when you're looking at individuals all over social media, and it's great advice, the challenge that I see is that a lot of people, they don't know how to run a business. So you get yourself into a situation that you think you're doing something great, and then you end up kind of fucking yourself over because, unfortunately, not every scenario can be got into with seller financing where you're not putting a lot of money in. That is the cherry on top if you can do that, but a lot of times you still have to put money into it, so there's still risk.
Yeah.
Right? So you can mitigate it as much as you want, but there's still something that's going into a business that if you don't run it right, can be catastrophic and actually have the reverse effects of what you're trying to do. So when we're looking at how to set a business up correctly, I know you've done this a tremendous amount. You get people that come to you and say, hey, look, I started something, but now what? What is it that you typically see from them where they're just struggling the most?
So just to kind of back up a little bit, because sometimes just with sales in general, it can kind of come off as, I wouldn't want to say like it's an emotional trap, but you know, people buy off of emotion. So when there are influencers, when there's these business folks out there that are saying, hey, you could buy a business, I think that's valid. That is great. That
100%.
That is awesome to do. But then what? Now that you have it, now that you acquired a company or an equity stake or whatever it is, and you're going to be running it, it's like, all right, well, what do you do now? It's like, I have no clue. I was just taught how to acquire the company and that's it. I don't really know what I'm looking at. I know how to maybe underwrite a deal and I can guess where things are going to go, but being in there on a day-to-day basis, not really. So oftentimes they'll kind of sandwich in a couple things as far as like training, which is make sure you have a good operator in place, make sure you have a good CEO in place. Like, all right, well, what if they die? What if they retire? What if they quit immediately afterwards? Then what? Who steps up? It's probably you. So there's definitely some emotional traps in there that happen. And that's just kind of the nature of sales. Again, it's really, really good. But when I get those phone calls, man, like it really, really varies. Hey, Antonio, I just bought a business. What do I do now? How do I grow it? Who do I talk to? How do I really figure things out? Is this CRM even worth it? Like, I think it sucks. They made it sound better than what it is. How do I verify that? You got to have another person come in and look at it. I do recommend that. It's like you bring in a legal team, right, to look at the paperwork. You're on site. Yeah, hopefully. If you're buying a brick and mortar, don't you want to inspect the building? But people tend to forget to bring in like someone like a business consultant to look at like, let's actually see what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, first thing is like, could you have come to me sooner? Like before you bought the business?
Yeah. Let me know. Like, you're going to pull a trigger on this? Like,
yeah.
All right, bro.
You know, like you mentioned emotions, right? And I think like I've almost made that mistake before where it's just a lot of us, especially if you're young or whatever, we're all like striving for success and we all want to like get it as fast as we can. And that can definitely bias you from trying to make something work that really you shouldn't get into. Like I've almost made that mistake on real estate. It's like, I want to make this deal work, and then you just, you got to look at the numbers. And outside of getting past the emotional aspect of, dropping your ego, thinking I can make this work versus will it work? It's also being able to then do due diligence. So what's your, like how do you kind of guide people on how to actually look at the numbers, especially if they're just like, I don't even know what the hell I should be looking at?
It really depends on the business, on what KPIs and what numbers you should look at. Obviously, like your accounting, anything related to finance, look at that, and also ask them like, what was the accounting philosophy, right? If a business is running like a profit first model or something else, you also, in terms of numbers, if you're looking at what KPIs are running, how do they land on those KPIs, what reports are running, why those specifically. Because it's easy to share a story of a business without verifying it. And if this is a new company and it makes sense, like if you bought something even simple as like a laundromat or something like you bought a marketing agency, you bought something else, you also want to you want to consider some numbers of how that company gets leads, where their business is coming from. So if you're buying something that has strong brand awareness, it's like Larry's Plumbing, something simple. But if Larry leaves and sells it to you, like how much of his base could leave to as well. So there's a lot of interesting things there. Just to kind of back up a little bit, when you are going through some of those business acquisition programs, a lot of them can be really, really good. There's some that are, I wouldn't go through them. You want to see how much they talk about business ownership, specifically around operations and communication. If you're going to do that and they're talking about those components, that sets you up a little bit more for success. So even if the emotional trap is there, or even if that hook is there to buy, that's great. Make sure that you're getting that side of it too.
Yeah. And I like what you said, and you somewhere in there he's talking about just how to grow it past, what happens, what are the worst case scenarios? They said if the owner leaves, does the business fall off because now people, they don't know you, so they want to go with maybe a competitor? What is the competition in the area? It's very easy to say, hey, we're doing really well, but it's
status
based on,
of staff is a big one. Like, is everyone like 60 about to retire? Is there a young staff? What's the ratio here? This whole thing is very similar to like martial arts. All these business acquisitions. It's like you take a couple classes and you think you can like throw hands with someone on the street. It's like, calm down, like relax. I get that you learn this and it's new information and it could be effective, but just like your first jiu-jitsu class, it's like there's so much more. And the last thing you want to do is you get knocked out along the way because you got overconfident because someone fed into your emotion. Yeah. So be wise about that for sure.
Yeah. So like, I'm just gonna like drop a quick story. My brother, who used to own a bagel shop with him and my dad, and then they sold it like right before COVID. So like talk about perfect timing. But he's doing real estate now, and he's like, I got the time to run another business. He just doesn't want to do what he did before, which was like fucking like 70, 80 hours a week. He's like, I know how to create systems now, so I can find something similar and then be a little more hands off. So he finds this place, bagel shop, like 10 minutes away from his house. They have a franchise, so he's like, all right, could just kind of, but then he starts looking into the numbers that they were showing him, right? There's that aspect too. It's like, what are you showing me and what are you not showing me? He's like, and then he starts talking to some of the staff and they're like, yeah, we're, to your point, we're going to probably be like quitting if somebody else takes over. And he's like, I'm going to basically be back to where I was, which is like working full time, having a hire, having a train. He's like, that's the shit I'm not trying to do. I'm trying to be smart about this. And he, for like weeks, he's like, I'm just going to try to make this, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work. And then he's like, what should I do? I'm like, dude, like you're basically telling me you're going to be right back to the same situation of working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And then after like 2 months, he's like, yeah, I turned the deal down. I'm like,
yeah, 100%.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, like the emotion. It's like, I want to make this work because there's revenue coming in already. I don't have to do a whole lot of work. It's like, you start looking under the hood and it's like all of a sudden this classic car that looks pristine is a piece of shit. And it's like, I'm gonna have to put a lot of money and time and effort into this.
Yeah. It's like, well, so revenue is coming in under what conditions? Does that mean like there's constant communication with these clients? Like what is it? What you're essentially talking about, and you see this especially when you're doing like real estate deals like multifamily. Yep. When you're buying a multifamily complex, like you're essentially doing a hostile takeover. Right. Oftentimes that's what happens. Give me the keys, give me the passcodes, give me everything, bank accounts. It's like a very quick switch. Yeah. So if, like with your brother, for example, you have some people that do acquire a business, but they are really, really good at psychology, human behavior, and communication. A really great book that I recommend people having where you're able to extract information without people really knowing is The Truth Detector by Dr. Jack Schaefer. That one There's another a book that he does, but he's a former FBI agent that specialized in espionage. How can I get information from this person without them knowing that they're giving me this, so they can make a decision on whether to pursue a target? If that's not business, I don't know what is. Right. What information can I get from the CFO, the CMO, the sales guy, the general manager, the office assistant, to help me determine if this is a good thing? And if I'm feeling like, hey, this could be a good acquisition for me or an equity stake, how can I have a communication with these people where they're like, I can see myself working for them. I can see myself working with Dan. Okay, cool. If someone's gonna buy this, I was thinking about leaving, but maybe with this person, the business might grow. I might get a raise. I might advance something. So don't overestimate or underestimate the power of communication. And where it shines through is especially on this side when you're doing your due diligence on a new business.
Yeah, I mean, that's like you said, they're not going to outright say, like, by the way, we're not doing great and we're like hiding stuff and this and that. It's like, you got to also know, outside of just being able to analyze numbers, that's, I think, one of the few instances where I'd say, all right, if your gut's telling you that this is a shitty deal, listen to your gut. Like, that's probably the one time where it's like, all right, I can listen to my instincts a little bit there. It's telling me it's a bad deal. But like, to your point, it's how do I extract the information if that's all they're giving me? It's, well, why is that all they're sharing with you? But then there is an aspect, kind of like FBI, and I know you're big into like, looking at CIA kind of stuff too. It's like body language, tone. Like when we look at communication, we know most of it is not verbal. So it's 7 to 10% of what people are saying. The other 90% is the tone that they're using and then how they just presenting their body language. And that's why it really is, to your point, when we talk about get good at communicating, it's not just the words, it's how you say it.
Oh, 100%. Like you cannot neglect the human element, yes. the human side of it. One of my mentors, Eddie Wilson, he talks about that all the time, that business is a science. It's really easy with X and O's to grow a company, to expand on different markets. There's a lot of really cool things you could do with that. But the hiccup along the way is the people element. And if you get really good on that side of the fence, on X's and O's with the business, but then how to communicate with someone to extract the best out of them, and not in a shady type of way, but just like, if there's greatness in somebody, there's opportunity with somebody, there is someone that has way more potential, it's kind of our responsibility to speak belief into that person. And if you have that side of the fence covered plus this, then it's really easy to go into a company and grow it and grow it and grow it and grow it and grow it. And someone like Eddie, for example, like he's exited over like $1 billion worth of businesses, over 70 of them, and it's basically following something like this.
Only $1 billion.
Only a little over $1 billion,
off.
Right? But what you're saying is like the never neglecting the human side of it.
Yeah. The other thing too, and you mentioned about revenue, right? And that's again, like I'm gonna probably hit on numbers a lot because there's a lot of people just like, I don't like numbers. Like, well, if you're gonna own a business, your ass better like numbers.
Yeah. Because tell me a time in your life where you're not gonna have numbers. Like I've been tell me when that's gonna be.
I love going to like a business seminar. It's like, how many people don't like numbers? And like half the room raise their hand. It's like, you're all fucking owners. Like you should love numbers. But I love it when people present gross revenue and they're like, here's how much we're making, and then it's like, here's how much we're losing. Wait, what was that? Like, our
Did
net
you say
revenue
net was 1?
Yeah, our net revenue is actually a negative, and that's where it's important to understand the vernacular and actually know your numbers. And like I love seeing that in like a company that has a stock, and it's like we made $2.9 billion this year, but we lost 3.1. Like, what are we like?
Yeah.
At some point, when are you turning positive? So it's knowing your numbers. When we talked about like knowing what's already there, and part of that too is going to be about kind of the system. So you talked a little bit about KPIs, and maybe someone's like, they don't have any of that. Mm-hmm. It's like, all right, then what do they have? What kind of systems are in place? If you're using a software, how old is it, right? Because again, we talk about unexpected expenses.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, all right, we have the software, and you're like, oh, thank God, I don't need to invest in it. Maybe you're opening a healthcare organization, and they have an electronic health record system. You're like, we're good. And then you find out this shit's from like 2010, and it's like a dinosaur, and I need to replace it, and that's $50,000 to $100,000 that I didn't anticipate.
Yeah, a big part is like, what is the thing that it's reporting? So whatever software, whatever CRM, whatever thing, it's like what is ultimately like what is its purpose? What does it give you? Is it necessary? Can it be duplicated someplace else? Is it automated? Is a person doing it? Like, walk me through why this is special, right? Yeah. And put these people kind of on their heels, because it does make sense for them to And I can totally get it, but this is just human nature. You kind of want to hide the things that can hurt your exit. If you know, like, oh, Dan's gonna buy my business, like, this is the most amazing CRM in the history. You're like, what does it do? What does it do?
Yep.
What are the reports that are running? Walk me through how you landed on some of these numbers here. So it's really getting good at asking some of these questions, and questions are powerful. But what's also powerful are presumptive statements too as well. If you get really, really good at that, there's such a natural tendency for people to want to correct you. And if you are throwing out these little jabs that you know are wrong, but just to see where they're acting, these are just little indicators you can get for yourself to see if they're truthful. And if you're picking up on these little things of, oh, this is what you're doing when you're truthful, and this is what you're doing when you're not truthful, it's like that spidey sense that business owners have or consultants have, where it's like something is off in the finance department, and we got to find out what that is before we put something in there.
Yeah. So like to me, that almost sounds like just being able to know what kind of questions to ask to, right? It's like, all right, if I don't ask the right questions, then you're not going to be able to kind of maybe give some jabs to see, all right, they're being truthful. It's like, I think an easy example would be if you're buying, talk about multifamily real estate. If you're buying an apartment, you're like, this deal looks amazing. It's like, hey, did you ask how old the roof is? Like, I didn't. Or, yeah, I did. They said it's pretty good. Like, all right, your roof's 30 years old. You're going to factor in, you're going to probably have to spend $100,000 in the next 2 to 5 years potentially to replace it. But does everything still look good? So it's like, kind of to your point, it's like being able to know what kind of questions to ask and then how to be able to tell, is this person actually telling me the truth? Are they hemming and hawing? That maybe is a little bit of a tell that it's not where it should be.
Yeah, I think that's really easy to do. So if I ask you, you go by Rick, right? You're like, no, it's Dan. I don't really need to, I just need to kind of look out for certain ticks. I need to look out for certain stuff. And so along this process of you just getting to know them, like, hey, I'm interested in acquiring your company. Let's, go out for lunch, learn about what you're looking for. I want to learn about the business and see if it makes sense for my portfolio, blah, 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 blah. And there's things along the way that you can kind of extract to see their truth level. This is totally getting in a completely different direction, but like, I think it's really good to have that. And when you are, even though you don't know what specific business questions to maybe ask, like, let's just say you're not super polished there, but you could tell they're a fucking liar. Then what? I don't know the questions to ask. It's like, no, well, he's a fucking snake, dude. Yeah. You should walk away. So there's a good balancing act of that. Is I think if you get really good with that, because I think people naturally are really good. Everyone has a bullshit radar, like meter thing. Everyone kind of can feel it. They just know it. Everyone has one. And if that's really ringing, even though you may not know all of the business questions you should be asking, if that's kind of, we said, going with your gut, that's something I would listen to 100%. That's going to develop all the business questions over time, especially if you have a good team around you. If you're just doing it all by yourself, like, okay, that's your probability of having some issues might be a little bit higher, but get some other team members, get a consultant, get a legal team, get a contracts person, get another company to do some comps for you, whatever, and really investigate it with a team. Yeah. Yeah.
I would just want to add to that little aspect that there are so many deals, and as somebody, and I'm speaking personally here, somebody who's invested in other businesses, has invested in real estate, and I'm old enough and thankfully mature enough to recognize that you pass on a deal, there are plenty more, right? So it's not a matter of like, hey, we're living in some third world squalor country that this kind of deal comes up once in a lifetime. You have stuff coming out all the time. So don't rush into it. Make sure you have your knowledge base of the numbers, competition, what happens if the market changes, is the business set up for a COVID kind of scenario, or maybe not as extreme, but is your business set up if inflation in the US gets worse and then the market starts tanking again. So it's being able to also, forecasting and just knowing that as sexy as something might look and as hungry as you might be, there's other deals. So that's why I would just kind of like touch on that, because that is important. And like I said, I've made that mistake. You jump in and it's like, the hell are you doing, dude? You let your emotion get the best of you. And now, like, you know, you can get money back, but it's still kicking the nuts, losing like tens of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. So, and this is kind of like the whole point of All Things LOCS, of what we're doing here with leadership, operation, culture, and strategy, is that when you acquire the business, it's like, what lens are you looking at this business through? Like, what's the leadership lens? What's the operational lens? What's going on with systems and processes and procedures in the organization? Does it have like 7 different softwares that are working in tandem with one another that you do not control? That's a big one, especially softwares like Go High Level and others, where it can be white labeled and you may not even have the keys to the kingdom. It's actually someone else. So if they leave, you're completely screwed over. Yep. That can be pretty ugly. Also, when it comes to a culture, like what is the current standing of the heart set and mindset of the people?
Yeah. So now, and that's a good point, right? And you mentioned at the beginning of the episode of, hey, I'm just buying a laundromat. So what's the problem here? Like, I don't need, you know, it's
definitely
very,
lower.
Yeah. It's very straightforward. There's like maybe 2 employees you got to worry about, but I think that's the aspect I feel like people, even when it's only maybe a 2-person operation, that they forget. It's just, you're still in technically a people business. Like, business and running a business is all about managing people, because at the end of the day, you're managing expectations, right? And if you think about it, you mentioned culture. It's like, all right, I got the laundromat. It's like, that's great. The person who's working for you still doesn't want to work for an overbearing asshole. So what happens if that one person quits? Now you're like, oh shit, this business that I bought to be very passive and hands off, now I'm fucked, because I actually have a 9 to 5 and I have nobody to manage the actual laundromat. People are stealing shit and machines are breaking and I have no idea what I'm doing. So that is really, I think, a hugely underestimated aspect of buying a business is, do I know how to actually communicate and manage people?
And that is assuming that business that you acquired is in your own city.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of coaching out there like, yeah, you're in California and you're buying a business in Nebraska because it just checks off on all the markers, all the boxes on this particular training program, because it's this blue collar business, or it's an HVAC business or something else. And it's like, okay, cool. And you do it. And a situation like that happens and you are thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away and you're liable. All right, then what? So the whole LOCS thing, even with culture and strategy, is like, what has been the strategy and the X's and O's up to this point? And then how are we, what operations are in place to make sure we have windows to everything? So that's a big one. But I feel like kind of another pretty big one is you mentioned like making sure you can walk away from a deal, you know, making sure that you're able to pull away, because there's always one coming. And I think when you're first going into this world of business acquisition, when you're running a company, it's like you're first. You want to make it happen. You have to have some discipline of also writing things down of when to walk away. And this is with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, looking at, like you talk about like the LOCS protocol itself, right? Just how we look at a business, making sure that your leadership is buttoned up. So if you need to do personal development, you know, that is going to be huge from a standpoint of being able to withstand the ups and downs, right? Because business is not, and I wish it was this way. I wish business was just like this, but
if
it's
only,
not.
right?
Yeah, it's like, that would be so freaking amazing. But it's really, life is very similar to, I was compared to the stock market. If you look at, 30 years over the stock market, you're going to have growth. But when you kind of zoom in, you see some major drops. So how do you handle those kind of scenarios? How do you handle when you're going through a bad season? Maybe, it's your winter. It's just clients are not coming in. You're slow. Do you have the mental capability to forge through? Because realistically, being an entrepreneur, which buying a business, you're an entrepreneur now, it's not for everybody.
It's not. And I think also when you're doing that too, especially when you're trying to look at like what happened with the company and then trying to forecast to the future, a lot of it goes into the underwriting of like if you're going through a business broker or if you're going through someone that and they're trying to give you all the financials, giving you everything that's going on with the business. And you have to be able to break that apart and make those numbers make sense. And then once you have a clear picture of that, then where does this business, how will it perform in the future? How will it perform in Q2? Is it a business that needs to be stabilized a little bit? Is there opportunity for you to acquire the business maybe with less money or maybe for an equity or for a consulting stake, something, and but being able to have the wherewithal to identify, oh, this thing has potential. And if you can do that, I think sky's the limit, because the compound effect of that, of having a growing business, is huge for your portfolio, way easier to do. And so all of that would not be possible if you didn't have a good team to really break down the underwriting that was presented to you.
Yeah. And, there are obviously some solutions, right, you can put in place to say, all right, if I'm going to buy this and maybe I don't have a team, or maybe I didn't hire consultants, is how can you leverage the past person's experience, right? So you have, like, I just think about even my own dad's business. I mean, he sold it, but then he stayed on for a year because at that point he was going to retire and he had nothing to do. But he sold it to those guys, and then he said, I'll stay on for this amount of time to help you out. Mm-hmm. So if you're buying a business and you don't know what the hell you're doing, that's probably a good avenue to take. If you don't have a team around you, or you don't have a consultant you can hire, it's like, can I maybe structure something out with the owner to stay on to help and kind of, walk me through what has to happen here. Now, obviously some owners, like, they just want to mail it in and, kind of sell off into the sunset. But again, if you don't ask, you don't know.
That's so true. And another, just to add on to that, is if that's a direction someone might be going, and you are realizing that the business owner is explaining things to you in a way where you're like, I don't get it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? Like, what? Whereas you can have another business owner that can simply articulate what's going on and be very precise about it. It's like they're able to explain why this is going on. They're able to explain, like, what this system is, how to come about. They're able to tell you, like, this is how involved I am with the company, what's automated, what's not. And they're actually able to explain things to you where you can understand. That is such a green flag. That's a helpful thing. Yeah. Instead of trying to force your way into maybe getting or acquiring a business, and you're not connecting with the business owner. You're feeling more confused than anything. And this is a feeling thing. We're like, I just don't, like, I get it, but I don't get it. I just have a hard time talking with you. That one is a huge thing I would consider too, especially if it's maybe an industry that's new to you and you are dependent on the experience and the business acumen of this other person, and you just can't jive. It's like a math teacher. Yeah. Some math teachers, you're like, I don't get it. But there's other ones like, oh, if only someone else showed me like that, I would have understood math so much easier a long time ago. So if you're going to buy a business and you're realizing that the business owner is kind of like the horrible math teacher, that might suck versus the other one. Yeah,
I still don't even know what the Pythagorean theorem is.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that I look at it, a lot of the solid advice centered around, buying, and I'm going to touch on, like, starting your own business for like a brief second, but buying a business that's cash flowing obviously is definitely easier than starting something yourself. Less capital into it. You got something that's already kind of net positive, hopefully. But then there's still the aspect though that past success doesn't equal future success. So even if this is what our revenue is doing, again, if you're not growing the business, you're losing, right? So we know average inflation is somewhere around 3.2%. So if you're not at least growing your business 3.2%, you're technically losing. And then we have a year like 2 years ago, and it was like 9, 10. I'm sure some people would say, oh, it's closer to 11 or 12%. It's like, that's great. So if you didn't know how to grow your business 10 or 11%, you lost for that year. You actually had a net loss. So there is that aspect too then of understanding, that's great, Antonio, I appreciate your advice, but I'm buying a business that's already cash flowing, so I'm good. It's like, yeah, but how are you going to continue to grow it? And you talked about like having some strategic growth, but that's, I feel like, an aspect people just like, I'm here, and then but then it's like, all right, now what?
Yeah, if anything, these are the calls that I get the most. There's a ton of relationships I have from people that are a part of a ton of different coaching trees around business acquisition. I'm not going to name names. There's a lot of really, really good ones. And there's nothing wrong with it. I want to just reiterate that there's nothing wrong with it at all. But when I get calls from other business owners who are like, hey, I'm looking at acquiring this business, I actually think that they don't have, I don't really run into that too much at all, really. I think they're very aware that they're trying to make a strategic business decision. This is an investment if they're putting money into this company. And they oftentimes are like, I know that the dollar is, from a buying power's perspective, it's changing. So although I'm buying this business and it is cash flowing, I need to look at this business through a lens of growth. I'm not really too sure how to do that. How can I expand on margin? How can I increase revenue? It's like what we talked about before. Business is offense and defense. What are some things that we're doing to get more dollars in? Offense. And what are we doing to reduce any hemorrhaging, any issues, any bottlenecks, things like that? And although that they're really great on acquiring it, if they get a completely different business, it's like, I just don't know what I don't know. It looks good. It is cash flowing. But at this pace, I'll be starting to lose money in a few years. So I need to make some changes. Where do I look at? Where do I begin? What area? And that's the whole point of, again, All Things LOCS.
Yeah. And I love what you just said there. You don't know, you don't know. So that's, the effect of the less you know, the more you think you know. And that's just very human, a human psychology aspect. It's like the more you actually learn, and that's like you talk to somebody who's educated himself and has a very growth mindset, you kind of feel almost like stupid the smarter you get, because you just see how much information and knowledge is actually out there. So it's the person who's like, I don't know what I don't know, but I have too much ego to maybe admit it, versus there's just so much here that I don't understand, and I need an assist. I need some help. Because like you said, it's not just a matter of like,
I would say that's the majority. I would say that's the vast majority that, because like no one likes losing money unnecessarily. Like nobody does.
I don't.
I don't. Yeah, let's just lose it just for fun. It's like, no.
I do that on accident.
Yeah, not at all. And so when these people are kind of moving that direction, they want to safeguard their investment, and they know this is like, all right, I'm buying a hypercar. It's already fast, but I feel like I can squeeze more out of this thing. I can tune the engine a little bit better. I can fix the alignment a little bit better. This is off here a little bit. It's already a well-oiled machine. It works, but it could be better. And if it's better, it's more valuable. And I think most of the calls that I get, it's actually more like, that's kind of the dialogue, that's perspective. If you are one of the people that are like, I have everything, good luck. Those are the ones that are going to be failing, because those are the ones that are demonstrating that ego. Because business is a collaborative effort. The more relationships you have with different entrepreneurs in different walks of life, there's different strategies that's developing in one industry that could apply in your own, but you're just not aware of it. It's like, oh, this works over here. If I flip this and this and apply it here, money. But you just don't know that because you're in a little cocoon. So collaboration over competition is huge here, and you really never know what company someone else is acquiring that is synergistic with yours. But because you're closed off and you're not asking for help, and you're not doing that, especially with consultants that have their fingers in a ton of different businesses, it's like, oh, you're doing it the right way. Let me part you up with this person over here, and your businesses are able to explode and do something really special. But if you're quiet and you're not reaching out and you're not getting a second opinion, it's like, how do you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about this conversation, this could be like a 3-hour talk. I feel like we both love this shit so much. But what I love about this advice and everything that we talked about, it's not just relevant for somebody who is acquiring a business. It's obviously incredibly relevant for somebody who's maybe starting it. Because also, like I said, the mentality for a lot of people is, hey, I open my doors, and then it's just like, again, they announce like, I'm here, and then nobody shows up, and they're like, ah, shit, what do I do now? So it's
cry.
Yeah. So like it fits for that person. But then when we look at, hey, look, my goal is just to maybe grow the business and exit in 5 years. Okay. Then you need systems. You need to play offense. You need to play defense. You need to increase the value and put all these things in place to actually increase the value of the business.
Yeah.
But maybe your goal is, well, I don't want to sell in 5 years. I want to pass this on to my kids. It's like, cool. Your goal is still the same, to make more money and make it easier for your business to be more productive. So you still need systems and leadership and working on the culture and your strategy. So it's all very similar. And that's why I love these principles, because it just applies across so many different spectrums.
Yeah. And the more that you can own, the better. And I mean this from like an intellectual property perspective. If you have a company where you're borrowing someone else's software, there's a ton out there that do a ton of different things. Like, take your pick. But if you're developing something that's unique to your business and you own it, like lock, stock, it's yours, way more valuable. There's a lot of little interesting things you can do there that, although it might be a financial investment to do that now, it can pay off in a couple of multiples later during your exit. So really making sure that your IP is locked in. And again, this really just depends on the business. If it's a laundromat, some stuff like that, like, car washes. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. But there's a lot of other stuff out there that might require you to have a fence around your IP, and then also your EBITDA, right? And then it's your operations.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the biggest takeaway for today is, I want you guys to take action, and if you're like, I don't want you to this to deter you from buying a business. So if you're looking at it and say there's great opportunities, trust me, I'm looking at it, and Tony's looking at it. We're both looking at the same opportunities, and we're salivating because it is going to be incredible over these next 5, 10, even up to 20 years. But it's just about being smart about what you're doing, educate yourself a bit, surround yourself with people who also have some knowledge base that can be an assist. You don't have to do this on your own. Hire consultants. I mean, that's what we're doing here, is to help people like yourself to make smart decisions and try to live as stress-free a life as possible while growing a business and building, a legacy. So I think that for me, it's just really being smart, not letting your emotions take over, working on your mindset, and then just educating yourself.
Absolutely. And we did cover a lot today. I recommend going to episode 3 where we cover operations. That's going to give you a lot of insight, a little bit more detail of the things we talked about today. And again, if you need any help, reach out to us, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Talk soon.
Welcome back to the follow-up. So we're going to spend just a few minutes touching on some really important aspects for healthcare when it comes to acquiring another business, which in this case would be another healthcare practice. So really the 3 things that I want to touch on, and I mentioned 1 or 2 of them in the episode itself, is when we look at the electronic health records that an organization has, and you're trying to analyze whether or not it works for now, but you also, when you're acquiring another practice, the goal is probably going to be to grow that practice. So it's really going to be important to understand, does this software have the capability to handle increased volume, if that's going to be your goal? Like, I know in the past, when I was in a practice and we bought out it was a chiropractor's office that the chiropractor was retiring, and we bought out the practice. That was one of the things we had to do, was analyze the EHR. It was a small practice in terms of the patient volume, even though they were in a large building. And we knew that we were going to grow that practice. So we needed to analyze and make sure, how much capital do we need to spend just for the EHR? Now, the second really important one, not even just monetarily, but what kind of RCM do they have, right? And that's really going to be a big one for, do they have the capabilities to handle what they're doing now? And the same thing, as you grow the practice, are you going to need to bring on your own RCM? Do you have a team in place? Like, maybe you have an in-house billing, or maybe you have another company, an RCM company, that's doing the billing for you. Now, again, that's going to be an expenditure. And even if you want your team that's already in-house to help build another internal team at this new practice you're buying, do they have the time, right? So it's not always a matter of just how much money are we putting into this. It's also coming down to how much time do we have to put into this. And that's, one aspect that when we're looking at acquiring any business, you have to factor that in. Do I actually have the manpower and the time to train and build and develop? And if I don't, then it means I need to purchase something else, which would be an RCM company in this case, to fill the need. And do I have the money to do that? And then really the third thing you're going to really be looking at is, honestly, and it's an easy one, but a lot of us kind of forget it, is how old is everything? Like, how old is the equipment? Do you have an ultrasound machine? Is it outdated? Do you have a CT scan machine that's outdated? Or if you're buying maybe a physical therapy office, how old is the workout equipment? Some of these things are not cheap. I know we look at even like an exercise bike on like the low end. It's like that can still cost hundreds of dollars. I mean, there's some out there that are well past $1,000. So you have to factor these things in. And when we talked in the episode about understanding your numbers, this is what we're talking about. It's going into it and understanding, where am I going to be putting money? And it doesn't always have to be right at the beginning, right? It's not like a matter of, I got to pour in $1 million or $500,000 into this practice, but you might have to say, well, phase 1, I might have to pour in $250,000 and hundreds of hours. So you want to make sure that if you're going to go forward with this and maybe expand your services, move into a new market by purchasing another practice, again, time and money, things that are very important and they're just not infinite, or they're not unlimited, I should say. So those are the 3 big ones I want you guys to look at. And then obviously, you're going to go and say, what does that organization's leadership look like? What kind of systems do they have in place? What is their culture? Are you stepping into something that's really toxic and crappy, or maybe it's just stagnant? Again, if you're buying something from somebody who's retiring, there tends to be a little bit of malaise. So what are you going to have to do with the staff that you have? Are you going to have to bring on new people, train them on your values and your standards? How are you growing that practice? So I'm advocating for you guys out there to, invest, buy other businesses, buy other practices when it makes sense, but just understand that, you have to know what you're getting into. And it's going to start with the big 3 that I just listed, as well as understanding just the LOCS principles themselves. I'll catch you guys next time.